again, and welcome to another issue of Technopolists. I'm one of your Technopolists. I am Ken Chan.
And I am Movies McConnell, otherwise known as MC2P4, and welcome aboard.
Right, we're here back for issue 3. First, just a couple of prelims here, movies. This week, in the mail, I got my Billy Idol Cyberpunk album on CD. Right? Yeah, I got that there, so I'm going to be jamming out to some of that. That's pretty cool there. I'm a really slow reader, so I've only gotten a little bit further in Snow Crash. But in Snow Crash, one of the things, a couple light spoilers, maybe they have this thing called Black Sun, which is like a virtual reality kind of club that people venture into, and they have their avatars. And they're different, some of the people using cheaper computers and libraries in the story. They have like real cheap black and white avatars whose the frame rate's really low, their faces shift and really slowly. Right. So I'm bringing that up because I am an Oculus Quest 2 user here. And there are a couple of apps that kind of make me think of that when I'm using them. One is called Rec Room, which you create an avatar and you float around. You float around from different activity to different activity, and it's like a community center kind of thing. It's like a hub, and you go in one room they'll have like it's like bowling, and another room there's like pool, things like that. And then there's Venues, which is another one where you go in and you can interact with other people, you can talk to them, you create an avatar for that, and it's more like it looks like a little piece of a mall, and there's like 6 different rooms right now. That's what they have now. And like one room they have like a rave going on, another room they might have some other kind of concert. They have like a game in another one, something like that. But the whole idea is you interact with people, and people actually come. I was in the one room, and this guy had a camera, and his little avatar had a camera, and he got us together for a group shot. So you have all these avatars. Now the avatars don't have legs; they're just like floating. They look like upside down light bulbs with heads on them and arms, and they just float everywhere. Sure. But we're standing there waving and stuff. Anything you do with your hands, the little guy does and stuff like that, and it tracks your head, and it's pretty interesting. And I was just kind of in my head comparing what the book, shows for a virtual reality kind of club kind of thing, and what we actually got in reality. It's a different thing, but it's still pretty kind of close, and it's interesting to see what we did get and where they are going with that.
The one thing that you remind me of with that is something that we had discussed before, that, okay, to give some background on this, Ken Chan came to my house, and I'm still sort of a Luddite in the fact that I have older gaming systems and stuff in my game room. So he put me into Virtual World, and the reason why I knew that Virtual World worked was because it made me sick. It actually made me physically sick from motion sickness, so I knew that it worked. Now, having had that experience, what I realized and discussed with him was that much of what's in Virtual World should be driven by the activities of, like, say, driving in a car. Right? So say you're in a virtual world, you're driving in a car. Okay, so just like in one of the Wii games online, you're going to the casino, you're driving the car, and you're all like, we're excited, rum, we're driving in the car. Okay, that doesn't need to be virtual reality. In fact, in my world, that makes me sick. So now I'm actually living real world because I'm physically sick by the time we get to the casino. Now have a world where I watched some of my friends on Facebook and stuff where they do like virtual performances on a Friday or a Saturday night. Like my friend David Kresge, he calls it music for shut-ins. Okay? So in that world, I would think that a game or an experience, like we were talking before we started this up tonight, Ken Chan was talking about the Darth Vader games / movies that happen in Oculus. So, but the whole point being that it should be a mixture. Like I kind of see this the Mii's in the Wii world, right? Like the Mii's, and that was like a way of mingling these things. But now, like these avatars, and like you're talking about in Snow Crash, they have Brandons and Brandys, or Brandys and Brendans, and you buy those avatars at Walmart, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
but now this would be like that thing in Escape from L.A. where, okay, so you go into that concert room, like you're walking around the entertainment complex, you go in and play games where you're playing like you're in Tron, and it's like all immersive and the whole deal. But then they have the ones where you go into the room, and so I guess what I'm saying here is that the form following function would be, now that my feet hurt, my knees are weak, and I've done way too much gear schlepping, that I don't want to stand at a concert and watch 3 opening acts and all this. I can not only walk into that room, see the concert I want to see, but sit here in my room at home and have beers that cost way less.
Right, yeah, yep.
Does that make any sense?
Yes. And that's something I think, with the pandemic, a lot of this stuff, like, for example, Zoom, that company that everybody hates because everybody has to use it now, but everybody gets online and communicates, they have their meetings and stuff like that. That and GoToMeeting, that because of the pandemic, that's boomed. I mean, that's just come out of nowhere. They never thought that they'd get the kind of business that they're getting now.
Sure.
And that's going to become that's part of the new reality. The new reality is going to be here to stay. I mean, a lot of companies are just giving in to the idea of just having people work from home. So I think you're going to see a lot of shifting around. The way people do everything is going to be, because they're finding out that it's actually cheaper and more efficient and easier just to leave people at home, let them work from home. It forced them to set up this new infrastructure kind of way of running their business. So, and that where the same thing works for entertainment, it works for games, the same kind of model, and we're kind of being propelled into the future with because of this pandemic. It's caused a lot of things to change.
And the one thing that you're talking about here, I think, I am no visionary of tech, even though I think I am. But
you are.
But 5G and stuff like that, like what we never considered with 3G and 4G, what we never considered was these upper layers of this OSI layered system in the Cisco switches, right? So back under 3G, we never thought we'd be able to do FaceTime, stuff like we're doing right now over regular computers, but we can do it on our phones. And I think that 5G is probably going to usher in some things that we have never even considered. I'm sure the giant tech heads at Lucent and Bell Labs and all this have, and I'm sure that they've thought, like, just as back before you had an iPad, I was watching Jefferson Y. Han out of University of New York doing those things on computer screens where they would take, draw the two pieces together, make the turntable play the song and go back and forth, waka, 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 do this, do that, grab these two, split apart. And we thought, wow, that was really cool, right? And then, iPads came out and it incorporated that technology. Now I'm kind of thinking that under 5G, maybe 6G, whatever comes next, I don't know. But I'm thinking that what's going to happen is we're going to be able to do those things like Utopia, the president's daughter in Escape from L.A., where she has the little remote control and she puts the disc in it, they press the button, and then the hologram, you're standing in the hologram. So you're looking to your right and you're seeing the ottoman there, and you're looking to your left and you're seeing the chair that's in the plane,
right.
See, so you're actually in it, right? So now, having said that, now let's go back to your initial statements, what you're talking about with like Snow Crash. I mean, obviously Neal Stephenson had talked to, and when you read that book, it's either the foreword or the afterword where they talk about how it was done, and he did talk to a lot of futurists and people to get these ideas. But I guess what I was trying to lead to here is just that some of the things they talk about doing in Snow Crash, they didn't know back in 1992 or whenever it was written how the internet was really gonna explode. So they kind of followed the 2 and 2 is 4, 4 and 4 is 16, 32, 64, 128, and they went to all the 0 through 127 nodes across their virtual world that in that respect they called the metaverse, right? I don't know if you've got that term yet in it, but they talked about the metaverse. And the thing is, they saw it all as avatars and what we would consider, like in a game like Myst, to be virtual reality markup language, walk to the library, go into the library, pull down the book, open the book, read the, but the nature of our computing systems and what they've been to this point necessitated eschewing all of that, Like all of that was just garbage. It was from a standpoint of practicality. You go to a file folder, you grab a list, you get what you want on the list, and you go. Right? You're not going to be like, well, I have to travel through some period of time to go over to this thing to go. The instantaneous is not there. Now, once we move to a 5G, 6G, it may be that, like Chi in my book, which you have not read, but like my character Chi, where he's able to go, I describe him as being able to conduct the ebb and flow of the zeros and ones of the digital ocean. Now, yes, somebody that could stand in a world like that and then pinpoint data and, you know what I mean? Like, as easy and pleasant as plucking it from the trees, right? And knowing what tree to go to and being able to get there immediately. So I think that what I'm trying to say here is that everything about this virtual reality world that I would pose to you, that in Oculus, do they make you do things to? It's hard to say. Like, okay, there's one circumstance where it would be you have to do a number of things to get to a result, right? So you have to find the briefcase, find the right folder in the briefcase, pull it out, get the clue, and then stick the key in the tree and have trains fall out of the leaves. Okay, whatever, right? But are they going to make you sit down and go, well, now I have to pee, and now you have, like, in the midst of this big battle, you got to go away and go pee somewhere? Maybe that could be part of the game, but in reality, right? That's in the virtual reality. That's a waste of time, or is it?
Right.
I guess I would pose that to you. Is it a waste of time? Like in some games, I guess, like what was it? World of Warcraft and stuff. It's like you had to eat, right? You had to go. You had to go and do these things. Who wants to do that? You want to just battle all the time, or you want to go hunt for treasure. That's the point of the. That's the point of the exercise, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll point out that there was that game, The Sims. It's talking about the having to pee. If you didn't take your little character to the bathroom, they would pee all over the floor, and then they'd cry. Seriously, in all seriousness, there was a couple times where I didn't know how to do it. I was not very good at that game when it was out, but it was one of the earlier Sims games. But I had this girl, and she started like doing this, and then she pees on the floor, and there's a puddle on the floor, and she's going, because I didn't take her to the bathroom. So I mean,
right.
It depends, and it all depends on what the purpose of the game. Battling is probably the most important thing. You get more out of it. But if you're doing a sim kind of thing like that, maybe stopping to go to the bathroom is a thing.
Right. Right. And I guess that's my point. Like, did you see the 6th Day? With Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he gets the daughter of Sin Pal Cindy. And Sin Pal Cindy keeps talking while there's like spies nearby, and Arnold's trying to get it to be quiet. He's like, be quiet, stop talking. And then all of a sudden he punches it, and then it's like, ew, I made a boo-boo, oh, and it starts crying and stuff. And then it's like, so on the one hand, it makes you kind of feel like, well, that's an annoying part of the game, right? Like, I got to get by keeping Sin Pal Cindy quiet, and at the same time, like, just like if it was a 3-year-old kid, you're trying to be quiet, you'd either kill it if it was going to keep you from getting killed, right? Or you'd in the face, and then it would cry, and then you'd be like, well, now I'm in deep, right? So on the one hand, it's part of the game, and on the other hand, it's like, you would have to ask, almost as a game designer, well, do we really have to, like, stop down from shooting Cylons and go take a whiz? I mean, unless that's, like something that you think is funny, and you're going to put it, it's kitschy, and you're going to put it into your game.
Yeah.
So,
I remember, what was it, Travis Touchdown on the first No More Heroes game. In order to save, you go into the bathroom, you drop your drawers, you take a dump, and that's how it saves. That's the set. Yeah. He goes in, he drops his pants, he sits there, he shows him sitting down there on the head, and that's how you save. That's how you save in that game.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, for reals. Okay, movies. I think it's time to move on to the next topic, which is All Hail Our Digital Overlords. There's not enough room for me to put this in the title, but I'm going to say what I wanted to title it is All Hail Our Digital Overlords. The blending of artificial intelligence and quantum computing. And for anyone who's a little behind that doesn't know what... Whoops. Here is a picture of a quantum computer. They kind of look like a chandelier. I don't know if you can see it. Probably not. I'm not going to share my screen. But they kind of look like a chandelier with a bunch of wires dripping down until you come to the bottom. And they have them. They measure their power in something called how many qubits, or a qubit that they use, qubits. And I'm not that super familiar with what they use for technology to make that happen. It's something to do with particles, but I know that they're just way more powerful than a regular computer. And I'm just trying to imagine down the road what's going to happen when they combine quantum computing technology, which is a leapfrog over normal computers that we have today, even the supercomputers, and artificial intelligence, which is an already existing technology. And before we go into this, I just want to say that some of the things that I'm going to say are going to be serious. Some of them are going to be comedic. I don't necessarily mean everything I say the way I say it, but then again, I might. You don't know. And that's why I say, all hail our digital overlords. Am I waiting for a time where the digital machines take over the world and make the world a better place from, humanity's follies, or am I just joking around with that? A Terminator or a Matrix scenario kind of thing. A lot of people are scared of that. I personally, I'll say this, I'm not scared of that. That doesn't scare me. And one of the reasons why is because if something like that would happen, I imagine the machines would at least keep a record of the people that were here that built them, and I would have a place somewhere. These movies, these videos that we make, and the other videos that I make on my other channel and stuff will be preserved. So if the aliens ever land here and they meet a bunch of machines living here, they'll be able to say, oh, here's this guy, he made these videos, if you want to see it, that kind of thing. But there's a series on Hulu called Devs. It's six episodes. It's about a guy. He's like a Steve Jobs or a Bill Gates, and he builds a quantum computer. And he's running all these tests, and it's one of those series that when you get to the end, your brain explodes and leaks out of your ears, and you're just like, huh? Because it's all about paradox. It's all about, a guy stands on a bridge, over the railing going like this, and it's windy. And in this reality, whoops, he falls. And in this reality, whoops, he falls like this. And in this reality, he falls like that. In this reality, maybe he stays there. And then he goes through paradox. And this computer that this guy built is able to analyze chance and paradox for things. And he's able to predict the future a little bit. Not really super far into the future. In fact, there's a point where it stops. It can't see any further. But it's, without getting into spoilers or something, way worth watching. Incredibly well done, and you get that nice little feature at the after you watch the end of episode 6, your head explodes and your brains leak all over the floor, and you're just like, what did I just watch? It's really good.
What's it called?
Devs, DEVS.
Oh,
Devs, like you developers.
Oh, devs. Okay.
Yeah, sure, but they call it devs. And devs is the department, yeah. And this guy wants to send. In the beginning, this guy, there's this young couple. This guy wants to put the dude from the couple into the devs. He's like, congratulations, I like the work you're doing here. I want to put you in devs. He takes him over there, and they set him in front of a machine. And they're like, okay. He's like, well, what do you want me to do? He says, you'll know when the time comes. He says, I just want you to use your skills and your knowledge, and you'll know what to do. And he's just like, well, yeah, so... But I won't go any further into it than that, spoilers. But getting back to the meat of this is the combination of something like that, technology like that's that intelligent, or that powerful, mixed with artificial intelligence. Are we going to have, an entire robot military at that point where nobody's ever in danger ever again of being killed in a war? Are we going to have... things like that. Are we going to have something that decides that the human race is a filth and must be exterminated off the face of the planet? There's all kinds of things that could happen there. A lot of it's science fiction, but we're science fiction here too.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious as to your thoughts on that, because I know you've considered this kind of thing before, not necessarily with the quantum computing, but now with quantum computing, it's a lot more real. There's a lot bigger of a chance that something that intelligent, which, supercomputers are even smarter and better at playing chess than chess players anymore. So,
well, it's funny that you bring that up, because there's, again, having the name Movies McConnell is kind of a bane and a badge, right? Because everybody says I relate everything to movies and TV shows and all this and that. But if you think about that, like, number one, go back to Hardware 1991, right? Hey, Chief, how'd you do that? Sicilian maneuver. It's like, machines don't understand don't understand sacrifice, and neither do fools, right? So, like, that's number one. That the human can always pull something out of its hat that it hopes that the computer has never been programmed for or could ever encounter. But, you go back through all these circumstances, like Forbin Project, right, Colossus, and then you got, when you were talking about Terminator and all that, and then you're talking about Skynet. Well, the guy in China right now that does the social indexing for people as to whether they walk across the street in a crosswalk or they jaywalk, and they get social points engineering up and down, which affects their ability to buy groceries and all these different kinds of things. That guy's company is called what? Skynet. Okay, so art imitates life imitates art. So then you move on to one of the absolute most horrendous directors of the known universe, otherwise known as Aronofsky, who did that abortion known as Requiem for a Dream. Sorry to spit in people's holy water here, but that is the absolute worst movie I've ever seen in my life. And the other movie that he did, which I consider to be a masterpiece of all time, is Pi. And it's a black and white movie about a guy that the little Chinese girl chases around after and goes, Max, what is 1,472.68 divided by whatever? And he can do it in his head. And at points he's like, 10.8.88888. Like, he can do it to, like, so many, it's like that whole deal, right? And in that, I was watching a thing the other day about how they said the random number generators during 9/11, 2001, all stopped being random for a moment. And that movie kind of examines the same kind of thing. It's like he's looking at the numbers in the stock market and looking at it as one giant organism. And he's like, that one giant organism is predictable by way of it being one giant organism. So he's trying to figure that out. Meanwhile, Lenny, the guy that's the Hasidic Jew, tells him, oh, it's Kedem, and it's this in the garden, and it's 1, and it's 44, and it's 256, and really the Torah is one giant data set, and blah, blah, blah. So it all comes to a conclusion again, and again, it blows your brains out of the back of your head, right? But then you go forward to, like, these circumstances where they talk about, numbers being this way and that way, and what's coded and what's not. So now you've gotten to a point, now I'm just trying to make a point here, you got to a point now where you got quantum computing. Now, in layman's terms, as I understand it, and you have to understand because I do write sci-fi books, and I wrote a sci-fi book and in the second book now I'm talking about yttrium matrix computers, which are made of yttrium, and they can do lattice computers, and they can do all these different kinds of things. Well, the whole idea is that I don't call them quantum computers, but in the quantum computing realm, it's still, in my opinion, because of the way that I write and what I write about, I have the opinion that we're not there yet. Because when they talk about a qubit seems to me to be a state between defined states. So, if a defined state is on or off, basic binary, 0, 1, on, off. Okay, now you have a qubit, and the qubit is, I don't know what I am, right? So, in my world, I wrote a thing called Ubix. Instead of Unix, it was Ubix, and it was one level higher than all of that. But if you look at Unix, it's 1, 2, and 4, right, for permission sets for user group and public, so that you can make up the numbers that you need in order to do stuff. Well, when you look at all this, it goes back to the same arguments as before. And if you could see behind me here, I'm going to raise my hand here, and on that bookshelf behind me, down at the bottom, is a whole grouping of unexplained phenomena books from Time Life, and the computers. It describes everything about computers from the very beginning all the way up until where that book series ended, and I pretty much came into that realm after that, so no big deal. But they talk about how the computer works for a 1973 Chevy Impala cruise control and all these kind of things. But the one thing that they explain, even in the artificial intelligence realm, even early on, and maybe this has changed, but in basic binary systems, you can predict what's going to happen. So a basic binary system can add and subtract, multiply, divide, and do analysis on many different things very quickly. Not at the same time. There's no such thing as multitasking. When people use that word, it's stupid. However, if you then had an artificially intelligent system based on their set of criteria, you could say to that artificially intelligent system, what's 2 plus 2 plus 2? And it might say 7, right? But if you ask a binary system, what color is that through your sensors, it would just not even answer. So now you have something that's trying to answer what's 2 plus 2 plus 2, and it goes 6, and they go, yay, ding, 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 and they go, okay, now what color is that? And it goes, apple, and you go, well, sorta, right? But that's not really the answer. Just like if you said to an early artificially intelligent system, what's 2 plus 2 plus 2, and it went 13? It's not there yet. So at the end of the day, any machine that we're going to make is already going to be limited because we're already limited by our scope.
Okay. I see.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I get you.
But I mean, that, again, this is very easy to say these things, just like Stephen Hawking, rest his soul that he's dead. But the point being that he was a lauded figure in theoretical physics, astrophysics. Could it ever be proven in his lifetime? No. So
right.
Realistically, he could have said the Earth was made of cream cheese. Well, he could have said the Earth was made of cream cheese, but he could have said that, Alpha Centauri was made of glowing cream cheese. We can't prove it yet.
Right, yeah, exactly.
So all of this is academic, but I would say when you start talking about the quantum computing abilities, which are not deniable, but on top of that, the artificial intelligence and what has been released, and this is something that's in my second book there's a lot of things that are starting to happen that I feel are stupid from the standpoint for me that I haven't gotten this book out yet because I was already writing about them and now some of them are coming true. And one of which is someone recently, there was an expert working group somewhere in The Hague or wherever it was, and they basically said, whatever you do, don't let this new version of this artificially intelligent paradigm get out. And somebody let it out. And it's floating around in our world right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So who knows?
I've seen the police dog. They have this robot police dog that has some artificial intelligence to it, and it's Boston Dynamics. I think they're called Boston Dynamics that builds the thing.
Correct.
And you have those little delivery robots that. There's videos of people helping them. I helped a robot. They won't help a person if they saw one lying in a street, but they'll help this robot get its little wheels up over the edge of a curb or something so it can deliver its pizza,
Yes, but conversely, and I don't want to be the negative guy, but conversely, there was a group that sent out robots. They were like peace robots, and they traveled across the United States and went to different cities, and by the time they got to the East Coast, they were non-functional because people had beaten the piss out of them.
Oh, really?
There's a lot of hatred, and you can understand where that comes from because we already have had fictional works that already denigrate all of that and make a case. But the other part of this is too that police and other organizations are getting lazy, and they're just going to send out these R2D2 robots to patrol perimeters. Now, okay, you want to patrol your perimeter of General Dynamics or wherever, fine. I got no problem with that. But when you start patrolling the perimeter, that it's just the R2D2 walking down the street going, rolling down the street going, sir, you just jaywalked, and then it's, attaching itself to you.
RoboCop.
Dragging you back to the constabulary. That's a whole different world. You think about it too, like fiction-wise, the whole point of the Isaac Asimov robot novels were the 3 laws. And if you don't know the 3 laws are easily enough. It's a robot may never hurt a human being. A robot must preserve its existence, and it must. I forget what the third is, but anyway, it's just basically do the right thing, right? And right stuff. But the whole thing is, all of the stories are all about where the humans didn't think enough about how, these laws could break down. And you mentioned something earlier about, like, if the robots ran everything or whatever, and if you read Robot Visions, which is all of the robot books, it's iRobot and everything, all of them all in one giant book. And it's very well presented because the book starts without you not even realizing it. And basically, the first robot comes back and says, it comes back from the future. And they ask it all these questions, but like they realize by the end of the story, they're not asking the right questions. Like, it talks about the great culling, and it talks about the terrible time. And they don't realize till the end of the story that all the people that the robot met in the future are what? Robots. So the world was at peace and was wonderful and beautiful, but only when the robots finally took over and fixed everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But additionally, there's a story where there's a power station in geosynchronous orbit, and the robots do the work. And what the work is in those geostationary orbiters, they are aiming power beams down to the Earth. And they cannot move more than an inch any which way, or they'll burn whole sections of city. So basically, a giant solar storm comes and is blowing the thing all over the place, but the new robots that they built were programmed incorrectly, and they think that they're godlike, and they think that there's no way that a human being squidgy and made of water could ever have built something as good as them. Well, so they lock the door and say, you humans are annoying us. We need to keep the beams going where they need to go. And so then the Earth calls later in the story and says, well, what's going on up there? We haven't heard from you guys. And they go, well, what's going on down there? Did any of the beams go off of the skids? And the guy goes, no, they've been perfect. And so the guy comes to the conclusion of the robots think that they're gods. They think that we're cockroaches. They think we could have never built them. They don't believe us. But what does it really matter? They're doing their jobs properly.
But the next thing I want to touch on with that is, the whole process of evolution. Evolution is something that, for the longest time, people have thought to be natural, but I come from a place where I believe that evolution is something that we can enhance, and we can make part of it for ourselves. Movies. Speaking of movies, there's a movie called AI. I don't know if you've ever seen it. There's a little boy. He's basically Pinocchio. He's a digital Pinocchio. To make a long story short, he wants to evolve and become a real boy. Towards the end of the movie, he ends up at the bottom of the ocean, frozen for thousands of years. Then finally somebody digs him up. Now, who is it that digs him up? It ain't people. I'm looking at these things. They're like black, shadowy looking creature things that
they're aliens.
They're kind of android looking, maybe. Now, are those aliens? Probably not. They're probably humans that augmented themselves with technology until they evolved into some kind of new species. So that's another way that could go too. It's not something where maybe the human race gets wiped out, but maybe we rebuild ourselves into something like we were talking about Ghost in the Shell. We take it, put the brain in the brain case, put the brain case into the body. Does it have to be a human-like body? No, it could be something with, I don't know, tentacles that's more efficient. Yeah.
And remember, there's varying degrees of that. And in the snapshot of time, in a timeline, you could be looking at something, like you said, 6,000 years later, right? Or you could be looking at something 600 years later. But even 600 years later, different people are going to look different ways, different cultures, all that. The one thing that I I've seen a lot as a theme in a lot of sci-fi is, there are some short stories that talk about. There's one short story. It's really good. It's only told from the standpoint of the person that's talking to someone else. So their answer, like the person that's answering their questions, is off camera and you can't hear them. So then that person goes, "Oh, really? That's how that works." Blah blah blah. So they're talking about that, and it's the person's talking about being a spacer, like being somebody who lives up on a satellite, and they're talking about how they have to exercise 20 hours a day, and how their liver has all but disappeared, and their lungs would never sustain them if they lived up. So you know what I'm saying? Like there's already things that would be changing about your human body just from exposure to radiation to certain nutrients that you would have to eat, to keep the facilities working, so to speak, and things like that. So I mean, there's a lot of that, and that's something that I touch on in my books too, where I talk about how the character still keeps going back and forth between, and I, to be honest with you, Chan, I own some copies of Ghost in the Shell on Laserdisc, on disc, on all kinds of things, and I've never watched any of it. So then here I am thinking that I'm coming up with some new concept where I have this girl who is essentially eschewed all want of being a physical being and lives as a digital being and still has what she considers to be a consciousness, and from time to time gets her essence placed back into a human shell, and does work for people, clandestine work for people, and things like that. So, pardon me, here I am thinking that I've come up with some grandiose concept, and you're describing it all in like one phrase: Ghost in the Shell.
Right.
So, but that's something that gets touched on a lot, is the changes of, like you said, when you see something at the end of a movie like that, you see these, it's funny. Again, I don't want to rip on anybody, but sometimes, like, our friend Matt and myself will say sometimes that, like, slow motion in movies is a cop-out, using flange for audio is sometimes a cop-out, and one of the cop-outs I always get to, and this is something that you and I think on one hand is kind of a cop-out, and on another hand is kind of a stupid thing to do, but like in Johnny Mnemonic, we said, I need a Sinologic 16, and I'm going to need a blah, 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 and those things don't exist, and then 10, 20 years later, you think it sounds stupid, right? But in some of this stuff, like, you say these kind of things, and then you're tied into it, right? But on the other hand, they didn't want to say at the end of AI, the whole idea of AI, because it was done by Stanley Kubrick and then finished by the other director and the other producer, was that, I guess, at the end, they were kind of pulling that game of, let's make you figure out what it was. Now, I took it as aliens, but you bring a good thought to the table here. It could be humans 40,000 years later, because they didn't spoon feed you to tell you what was going on.
Right.
So the point you're making is those black shadowy beings, or whatever they were, those shadows, were they human android hybrids? Were they?
Yeah, something that evolved out of human and technology, human and silicone put together kind of thing.
And it's always going to be Borg. It's always going to be until everything would become a Cylon, right? And I mean, even the early, like, I didn't watch all the new Battlestar Galactica, but the earlier ones didn't really make much sense from that standpoint, because why would you go from being humans to being some, by your command, whereas, like, the new ones were more what I think that the writers of that had in mind, like more of a simulacrum, that you couldn't tell. Like, and that's again, like, back to Blade Runner, right? Replicant. Like, can you really tell that it's a human? No, you cut it, it bleeds, it's everything that you would think it would be. But when you ask it that 42nd or 43rd question, and it goes gonk and shuts down.
Yeah. Well, thanks for hanging out with us tonight. And if you like what you've seen, smash that like button. Be sure to share and subscribe, and share, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time.
Smash down hard on that like button. But don't break your keyboard.